Well, this ought to answer a few questions about my piece and my peace. "30 seconds!" You may see this simple airborne skull charm and think, wow, that's got Airborne Ron written all over it. And at the time we commissioned them to be part of our permanent inventory, you would be right. But since then, it has taken on an even greater meaning than I could have ever anticipated. The same applies with the Spartan helmet charm. Since Thermopylae, it's resonated throughout the Warfighter Nation as a symbol of our might, fidelity, tenacity, and our unmatched resiliency. This is the story that inspired our hashtag, Jesus is my jump master. But it's become so much more than that. It's quite literally a metaphor for a path for myself and others to see Jesus for who he really is, at least through a paratrooper's perspective. And it reminds me to trust in him, not just when it counts or when I need something, but daily. Not just during triumph, but also during tragedy. Always. As many of you know, I was a career paratrooper in the United States Army, and if you've been around the last decade or so, you know that I also let pride in something other than God very nearly cost me my own life. In the airborne community, trust is an absolute. It's so integral to every operation, yet is rarely spoken of specifically, as operations are usually very rapid and fluid in their movement, up to and including the moment of execution. It's not spoken of because it doesn't have to be. Quite simply, it just is. When lives are on the line, trust simply cannot fail. We go to school for weeks so that we can stay on jump status for years, so that we can experience that one moment over and over again. The professional paratrooper, it is no doubt a rush like no other. And to the legman, the layman, the most accurate description, short of being there, that I could give you is that it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on. Fact. But after the seemingly endless hours of pre-jump training, a ride in a cattle truck, a gratuitous pre-donning of the parachute trip to latrine, because experience comes with wisdom, a quick stop by the gut truck for a pre-jump last supper with the boys consisting of a burrito, donning of the chute, being JMPI'd by a Jumpmaster qualified senior parachutist, doing the airborne shuffle down to green ramp, and out to the aircraft, wearing full combat equipment. And after a slow roll down the tarmac, we take off. And then we wait. Depending upon the mission requirements of the Air Force for the aircraft training at the time, the in-flight time may be anywhere from 50 minutes at a minimum up to 3 hours or more. After we take off and the aircraft stabilizes in flight, we loosen our chin straps, cross our arms over our helmets on our laps, and proceed to go to sleep. That's right, we're getting ready to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, and what are we going to do? We're going to take a nap. At 20 minutes out, the Jumpmaster team stands up at the appropriate time and gives the command of 20 minutes! At which point we briefly lift our heads, smile at one another, and immediately drift off back to sleep. Now, at the 10-minute mark, things are about to get a little saucy. The Jumpmaster team stands and gives the command of 10 minutes. Then we start to stand up and then hook up, the weight of our combat load now fully absorbed by our bad backs and surgically restructured knees and glass ankles. At this point, We are fully embracing the suck. And as your calves slowly turn to jello, just like that, all of a sudden you realize you have to pee worse than you've had to in your entire life.
Oh no!
Speed, adrenaline, physics, muscle memory, and bodily functions all come together to form a glorious moment of existence. As soon as that door opens and that wind hits your face, life changes. No longer is there a musty scent in the air of gut truck burrito burps and sweat, just the sweet, sweet smell of that fresh air blowing through the length of the aircraft. You know, it kind of smells a lot like freedom. At the 1 minute mark, the Jumpmaster team gives the command of 1 minute, and for a split second, everything is surreal. As you and your fellow paratroopers echo the command, you can no longer hear the wind. You're listening for the next command at the 30-second mark, and your adrenaline is now in fast and furious mode on a hair trigger. At this point, your HUL meter is pegged, and I am jacked the truck up. And the only thing any of us is looking for at this point is for that light to turn red to a glorious green glow. Side note, if your position on the Jump Manifest affords you the opportunity to actually see the light as it changes color, it is truly a wondrous thing. Incredible calm takes over your whole body, your whole being, rolling down to your toes like a wave. Your body cries to get out the door and relieve the pressure of the now nearly unbearable weight on your lower back and knees that they're carrying. Yet somehow the pain is not as intense as perhaps it could be. Adrenaline. You begin to airborne shuffle towards the door, and in your peripheral you see paratroopers exiting opposite doors one after the other. A beautiful symbiotic battle rhythm in motion. The paratrooper in front of you now exits the door, and now it's your turn. You make eye contact with the safety, a qualified jumpmaster, and the individual directly responsible for your life as you exit the aircraft. Moving at combat speed at this point, you have a millisecond to make eye contact with this individual, extend your static line whereby it is then swayed rearward with their arm, thus facilitating a clean exit without getting our arms ripped off or pulled out of its socket at best. And if you have a poor exit, you might even have a nasty case of riser burn at this point. Good luck explaining that one to your wife when you get home. Google riser burn later. And that one, that's not on the safety. That's on you. The main point of my message here is that in being truly free to do what we need to do, we often need to trust someone we may or may not even know. And you may have to relinquish something valuable to you in order to receive that kind of freedom. It may come down to that very moment. The stakes might be high, as they are in airborne operations. Lives are at stake, make no mistake. And when I look at that man and turn loose my static line, I have given him the ultimate trust. I'm trusting him with my life. You know, my last unit in Iraq had a motto, which we still use today. You bet your soul on what you believe. You bet your life on what you know. There's definitely some truth in that. Although I miss jumping more than anyone will ever know, I move forward knowing that Jesus truly is my jump master and that there are new drop zones ahead for me. When I find myself in uncharted territory or fearful of something, I have to remember to trust him. We cannot be truly free until we give away that fear, that control, that anxiety, or whatever it is that you find is a barrier in your life. Trust in him. I do. Keep your eyes on him and relinquish your static line. Just let it go. Whatever it is in your life that you need to release, and experience a freedom like you've never known before. After all, eternity is an awfully long time to be wrong. That was my piece. Now, I'm going to show you my piece. When I finally worked out this braid, it was something I'd been working on in my head for a couple of years. And at the time, I thought it was an accident because I was working on a completely different project at the time. But as I plugged along, a definitive pattern developed, and it was absolutely beautiful. Immediately, the color combinations started racing through my mind, different buckle and shackle options, and then there's entirely different chord strengths to explore. For a 550 chord para nerd like me, It was pretty cool, but it was a gift, and I very quickly recognized it as such. You see, for years at that point, I'd tied thousands of pieces already, but only slight variations of the same two braids. And while they were the same braids that every other paracord enthusiast was doing, I wanted not only something different than anyone else had done, I asked God to give me this, a new braid of our very own. But it had to come with meaning, real meaning to it. I had driven our small daddy-daughter project, turned small business into the ground, and after nearly losing my family and after an unsuccessful suicide attempt, I made the absolute best choice of my entire life. I was tired of trying to be the captain of my own ship, because when I was driving the ship, it was constantly running aground. You feel me? But what can I say? I'm a soldier, not a sailor. Out in my shop one day by myself. It was very quiet. I hadn't tied a knot in over a year at that point, and I wasn't really sure I would ever do it again. I looked over at those bracelets on the wall, about 200 of them, just gathering dust, and all those hundreds of charms hanging on that nail board that a neighbor had made for me in order to make things easier for me around the shop. I looked over at the metal signs on the wall that Thor, a Lurse guy from Air Cav in Vietnam, our very first paying customer, had sent me with our logo. One with the newer one and one with the old Airborne Bronze logo. He had no son, and he had sent me those signs along with his leather flying jacket from his Dark Horse days in Vietnam. The guy was a total gentle giant and an absolute badass. He was rocking a triple canopy in Vietnam just for fun in between his 3 tours. He was the one that first told me that this was so much more than 550 cord bracelets and that it would one day have a much greater meaning. Like most things, that's how it began, truth be told. I just thought he was being a sweet old man, and I begrudgingly accepted his compliments, even though, honestly, I didn't believe a single word of it at the time. I glanced over the shelves and the walls in the shop, spotting trinkets and small gifts that warfighters and their families had sent us over the years. It really would be a shame to let it all go for nothing. My ways were clearly not working. You know, in John 14:6, Jesus told us that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And so I thought to myself, why am I fighting this so hard? So I stood there, leaning on my bench, and I asked God if he ever wanted me to tie another knot again. If he didn't, then I would be more than okay with it, and I would accept it. My carpal tunnel in both hands, as well as my arthritis and my partially paralyzed right arm, would be most appreciative. But there was only one problem, and thankfully it had an easy fix. The problem wasn't that I believed in God. The problem was that I really didn't know Jesus at all. And I was living the life of what I now like to call a paper Christian. Ironically, and I have known to put the Ron in ironic just as much as I put it in Rendezvous with Destiny, I was one of those people that I believe now is problematic and sadly emblematic of the modern church. I wasn't the problem, but my sin sure was. And here I was, almost arrogant over avoiding most of the usual suspects that others had fallen prey to over the years. Alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, among others. I never saw myself as better than anyone. I just learned those lessons earlier in life than most by watching those around me. And it's not like Satan didn't throw each and every one of them at me at some point during my career. But I just kept seeing those flashing red lights from being homeless at 16, staring me down, like the eyes of the devil himself, just waiting for me to wear down. But without a firm foundation in God, I was rife with unnecessary suffering and bound for failure. In avoiding all of those other things, I had inadvertently fallen for the original sin itself, the one that got Satan himself kicked out of heaven. I had fallen for the pride of life. And that pride had me falling faster than Icarus on a hot day. But after that day in the shop, I began tinkering around with cord again. And I combined the newly discovered Triax or Trinity Helix braid with these beads and a floating cross over the static line snap hook. Our signature floating cross, a reminder that God needs nothing to stand on but His own word, inspired by John 19:30. It just made sense to me, and it was the perfect illustration of my journey and Jesus being the jump master at the center of it. It was all starting to come together. I can see each and every piece in my mind before it's done, but the odd thing is, I can't start even beginning to tie it until I can see it. If that makes sense. It's almost like an artistic version of writer's block. Those crazy creative types. But when I do, it's go time. And that's when I start getting really excited. I start laying out the cord, doing my final prep before going in. After hundreds of hours of drawing time for a charm and all the mental gymnastics that go into praying for it, putting it all together and presenting it, it takes me about an hour, 90 minutes or so to finally tie it. And for a guy like me, that's the longest hour and 90 minutes of my life. I told you, God's still teaching me patience. Every piece is the most important one. Because every piece isn't just a pile of cord and some metal crafted together to make something new. It's the story of one of us. And that's why it's so important to get each one right. Because each one is a one of a kind. And we believe when God put you on our path, He gave us His perfect one-of-a-kind creation, made in His image. And when He did this, He gave us His very best. And if He's willing to do this for us, then who are we not to return this in kind and give you our very best? So why does so much go into each one? Because you're worth it. So to bastardize an old movie line, there are none like it, but this one is mine. I've only got about 5 or 6 pieces I've made for myself over the last 13 years. And I thought I'd break the ice on this new Elite series with this one here. This is my personal piece I just made for myself. Again, something I rarely do, but I wanted to break the ice with this one. This is the Jesus is My Jump Master piece featuring a cobra buckle. And we start here with the paratrooper skull bead. And that symbolizes at the end of my career, I felt pretty dead and hollow on the inside. And then the Trinity Helix braid, of course, the 3 strands representing the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's where you get your strength from. And this is 275 cord, but it's gutted. If you know anything about cord, that's where it gets its strength. So without the gutting, it shouldn't be very strong. But the braid makes it rock solid. If you get your strength from the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, you keep your mind on and focus here on Jesus being your jump master. You stay strong. Now you can be a warrior for Christ and serve your fellow warfighter nation. But here's the key and the most important piece of all. If we don't keep this connection, this falls away and doesn't serve its purpose. But if we keep that connection with God, we don't risk falling away and not serving our purpose for Him. So now you've heard it. My piece and my piece. After over 20,000 pieces, hear me when I say this. I couldn't possibly get it right 20,000 times. And God won't ever get it wrong. Not even once. on My Blue Smoke. Smoke Jumper 7, out.
Do not get off on exit 22, over.
We're cleared hot at this time.
Smoke Vet 6, this is Smoke Jumper 7. Roger that. Next mission, time now.